Let's start with the eyebrows. It's no secret that the human head is not flat and has a round shape. I divided the face into working areas. Each of these areas requires a different approach to work with, a different seat position, different hands position, and a different client's head position. These areas are marked with a respective color. The front area is red, the central area is blue, and the tails are green. When working with a certain area, the position of the master and their hands, as well as the client's head, changes. Let's take a closer look at each of these areas. Each of the three areas are marked with different color. I've done it so that you can easily remember and understand what area we are discussing at the moment. In almost all cases, the area of eyebrows has a relief. When working in these areas, it is necessary not only to reduce pressure and stretch the skin in the right direction, but you should understand that the eyebrow area is also divided into separate zones. On reliefs, the handpiece should always be perpendicular to the skin surface. This will ensure the correct angle of pigment implantation, which will eliminate the risk of its migration. I'll remind you that when you work on reliefs, the skin should be pulled to an area where it can be as flat as possible. Usually, the skin is pulled towards the eyelid with the help of 2 fingers of the fixing hand and the little finger of the working hand. Eyebrows have the most relief areas in micropigmentation. Reliefs can be clearly visible, or, on the contrary, they can be hidden. In the second case, it is much easier to work with. As an example is the Asian or Afro-American face type. I want to draw your attention to the fact that when you work with reliefs and on bends, the angle of the handpiece should always be 90 degrees. In this photo we can see what can happen if you do not reduce pressure and do not change the technique when working on a relief. The pigment migrates due to the fact that the skin in these areas is thinner and the immersed pigment can easily accumulate there. But the pressure of the movement and the depth of work do not change. If you don't change the technique, the pressure and the speed of the movement, the hair strokes will be too intense. They will migrate and eventually get blurry, or in the worst case, it causes a very severe injury. A densely applied pigment as well as a deeply applied one will 100% migrate and form micro smudges around the pattern. Now we will look at each zone separately: the front, central, and tail zones. The frontal zone. The front zone on eyebrows is a very tricky area. The zone that is most exposed to the sun, light, wind, and sweat, the so-called T-zone. If the skin in this zone is oily and porous, it's very difficult to make hair strokes here. I recommend filling this zone with short lines or strokes simulating shading. This video example shows you the principle of the hand's position in the frontal working area. In the front zone, when working on the far eyebrow from you, the position of the elbow of the working hand should be absolutely stable. The fixing hand pulls the skin upwards. The position of the elbow of the working hand is stable on the client. The little finger of the working hand at the same time pulls the skin down. Now we will look how it looks from the distance regarding the position of the master. The client's head is turned towards the master. The fixing hand pulls the skin up, and the little finger of the working hand pulls it down. The position of the handpiece on the reliefs is 90 degrees, and the elbow of the working hand is laying stable on the client. When working with front zone of the closer eyebrow, the position of the master changes. The elbows of both hands should be pressed against the master's body. When working with this eyebrow, you should work a little more behind from the client's head. The position of the master changes too. The elbows of both hands should be pressed against the master's body. When performing the hairstroke techniques on the front zone, we should focus on small areas. Let's look at the position of the master. Working with the near eyebrow, the fixing hand also pulls the skin off the forehead a little bit up. The little finger of the working hand pulls the skin down, and both elbows of the master are pressed to the body of the master. The master now is a little on the side or a little bit behind the head of the client. Please pay attention to the movement pattern of the master. This is clearly visible in this picture. Pay attention to the change in the position of the chair when the master works on the far eyebrow and when she works on the near eyebrow. The central zone. The central zone is the body of an eyebrow. This is the zone for starting our work. This is the most intense and the brightest zone. This is the zone for creating shadow for the volume effect. When working in the central zone, fix the head and tail of the eyebrow, but don't pull it diagonally. The angle of the handpiece should be 60 to 80 degrees. When working in the central zone of the closer eyebrow of the client, the head of the client should be turned to the opposite direction from the master. And when working with the further eyebrow, on the contrary, the client's head is turned towards the master, but the angle of the handpiece remains the same. An example of fixation with two fingers of the fixing hand and stretching of the skin with the little finger of the working hand. And we perform lines. Please remember, fix the head and tail of the eyebrow without pulling it diagonally, as this will distort the sketch. In this case, when working in the central zone, the position of the elbows of both hands do not change. They are stable, regardless of which eyebrow you are working with at the moment. Fixing with the left hand and pulling with the little finger of the right hand, the angle of the handpiece is 60 to 80 degrees. When working in the central zone of the closer eyebrow of the client, all the rules remain the same. The head of the client should be turned to the opposite direction from the master. Also fix the skin without pulling it diagonally. The seat of the master is lowered. Let's see how it looks from a side. The seat of the master is lowered, pushed back slightly, the back is straight, the elbows of both hands are fixed, the client's head is turned in the opposite direction from the master, and then the lines are performed. A zone in the tail. The upper arch zone and the tail zone are the zones where there is a greatest risk of the pigment migration. Since the skin in those zones is much thinner than in the others, the master has no right to make any mistakes here. When working with the tails, the client's head should be turned in the opposite direction even more. You should remember that the tails of eyebrows have the thinnest skin, and it's necessary to change your technique to a more delicate one. Use 2 fingers of the fixing hand and the little finger of the working hand to make the fixation. The same eyebrow, the master's seat is lowered, the chair is pulled back, the client's head is turned further to the side, stretching, and then performing the lines is extremely delicate. Once again, I would like to draw your attention that the tails of the eyebrows demand more care as the skin there is the thinnest. It is necessary to change the technique, namely, apply the minimum pressure and the maximum tension. The performing of the lines is delicate. When working with the tail of the far eyebrow, we turn the client's head to ourselves as much as possible. We fix the lift and tail of the eyebrows, creating a flat area with a straight line. The location of the client's head varies depending on the eyebrow you are working on. Remember that the tails of eyebrows have the thinnest skin, and it's necessary to change the pressure, tension, and depth of immersion of the needle. You should work only with the cutting edge of the needle on the surface of the skin. Make sure that the skin is stretched enough and fixed in the work area. If you remember, sometimes we need to pull the skin in cases of clearly visible relief. As you can see, the position of the master has also changed. The master has become closer to the client. The back is straight. The client's head is turned as far as possible to the master's, and delicate lines are performed. We fix the arc and tail of the eyebrows, forming a flat area with a straight line with the help of 2 fingers of the fixing hand. We gently press when working with dry skin and use stronger pressure and tension when working with oily, thick skin. Let's see how it looks from a side.